Peace and love, family. Welcome to another Read Book Club discussion. Tonight we are discussing the last chapter, family, of They Were Her Property by Dr. Stephanie E. Jones Rogers, White Women as Slave Owners in the American South, family. And I am your host, Dr. Ma'at, and I have a panel full of bright young youth who have been discussing this book with me. My co-host had to step out, but he'll be back. So nonetheless, Sister Marcia, you go ahead and introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Hi, my name is Marcia Pender. I'm the mom of two of the children that have been participating. I also homeschool my kids, and some of the kids that I help homeschool with their parents are also part of this book club discussion. And we're just so extremely grateful that Dr. Mayat has allowed us to participate and, I don't say deal with the children, but she's been very patient and very welcoming and warm to them as they have participated in this program for the last couple of months. And we just so appreciate you extending the offer to allow them to practice some of their public speaking skills and share their thoughts. And so I just want to say that since it's the last book club discussion for this particular book. So thank you so much for letting us participate.
No, I want to thank you. Oh, let me. I want to thank you because when you reached out, I was super excited about, just because this is like an intergenerational panel that we've put together, and I think it was phenomenal. Usually it's brother T and I, discussing, and there he is. He's back. Let me add him to the stream. So usually it's brother T, and I, giving our perspectives on it, and so it was just wonderful, to have to just listen to young minds, give their thoughts, about the material that we've been reading. So I think the honor was all mine. I say all that to say the honor was all mine. And I appreciate, the suggestion. You said, well, yeah, let's bring them on, and I would love to bring them on and for them to discuss the books with you and brother T. And I think it was a phenomenal discussion. I mean, a phenomenal suggestion. And so I give thanks for you all. And I do want to salute your daughter. You said she went to film camp, about what, 2 weeks ago. You all were out in California, and I appreciate you. So I appreciate you. I really appreciate you putting it on Facebook. Because that's how we were able to keep up with what she was doing, and we saw the pictures, and I felt like almost like I was a part of the process. When you guys arrived, what happened on day one, what happened on day two, and so it's just amazing. It's just wonderful to see young people doing amazing things. So Taryn, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go to your brother, and then we'll end off with Sabria, and then brother T, we'll go to you. So go ahead, Taryn. You do your thing.
As Dr. Mayat just said, my name is Taryn Pender. I'm 17 years old and I am a teen director. I strive to tell Black stories through my storytelling in any way possible, through all different types of lenses. I specialize in horror films, but I try to tell Black stories within those horror films in ways that haven't been done before.
Hello, my name is William Pender. I am a part of this homeschool group, and I'm just glad that I'm here.
I'm Sabria Badu, and I'm 16, and I'm just happy to be a part of the group as well as being homeschooled with Marcia.
I'm Jacinte, I'm 15, and I'm excited to read the final chapter of the book tonight.
Hey, and I'm Brother T, and I'm just happy to be part of this stellar panel. And once again, last chapter, chapter 8, we're looking forward to chopping it up and discussing it with the Maadian family.
And peace and love. And I got, speaking of my audience family, I see Becky Brown is in the building. Says, hey, everyone. I see Baba Gregory Terrence is in the building. Hotep to the my audience family. It says, save the best for last. B1. B1 all day, Baba. I see the Queen Mother Dawnette Mitchell's in the building. She said, greetings, everyone from California. By the way, what do the acronyms READ stand for in the book club? I'll drop that in the chat. Exactly, Brother T. Where's your t-shirt, Brother T? You don't got it on. Neither one of us got the t-shirt on, but I drop it in the chat. And so READ is regain, elevate, aspire, determine. So regain our history, regain that knowledge of who we are, and use that knowledge to elevate, right? To elevate and to inspire, aspire, right, to be what we was and greater, right? Aspire to be what we was and greater. And then D, be determined to do all that stuff. So regain, elevate, aspire, and determine. And so that's what it stands for, Queen Mother. All right, I had to go back and look. All right, so it says Blockchain Revolution says peace and power to you. Says I like the YouTube. Ashe. Who else we got in the building? The beautiful, oh, we got a lot of people in the building. It just came up. Look, a beautiful mind is in the building. Peace and love to you. I see Ron L is in the building. Queen Mother Lay Low Love is in the building. All right, Donette said, great to hear from our young people. Ashe. I see Kwame is in the building. Said peace and love from the UK. The UK is in the building. Sister Juju, peace and love to you, Sister Juju, Black African Power. She said, we ready for the final countdown, or they were her property. I see Sankofa Face Yoga is in the building. Peace and much love to you, family. I see the goddess Yemaya is in the building. Peace and love to you, queen. It says Mulisma. I want to say Muslimah. I hope I didn't butcher it. Okay? Muslim with an A, and I just hope I didn't butcher it. But peace. Oh, it says peace from Egypt. Brother T, this must be some J coins, some JT coin rings people sliding in here. Are these some of your JT coin rings people?
I do not know.
All right. Well, look on some new subscribers. So peace and love to your family, all the way from Egypt. Peace and love to your family. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we get tonight's discussion started, I do have an announcement that I want to make. All right, make sure, family, that you're in the building next Sunday from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. All right, it's the Mother's Day brunch. Missing our moms, MOM, missing our moms, our grandmothers, and our aunts. And so I just give thanks for this woman right here, Sister Marjorie, for just being the visionary, for this event. And it's going to be an annual event, and this is really going to be a celebration of mothers with a brunch, DJ, all kinds of stuff. All right, we're going to have a good old time there. We're going to put up a huge ancestor shrine. So please bring something that any mother figure, some people might say, Dr. Maya, I ain't got no mother that transitional grandmother, auntie, or whatever. But it could be a mother figure, or even if you're with your mom and you want to celebrate, I'll be right there with my mother, celebrating. And so if any type of mother figure transition, bring something of hers, right? It could be her picture, it could be something she wore, her favorite food, something she liked to drink. And so we're going to create a massive shrine, and we're going to feed the shrine. We're going to feed it. We're going to pour libations. We're going to pray, and we're going to have a really good time. So make sure that you're in the building. Admission is $75. And you might say, Dr. Maya, $75. Yes, it's going to be a lot of stuff going on. You got K-Love, the poet, is in the building. This was the sister who went viral on IG. She recited some poetry, and she went viral. It was all over the place, right? She got over 100,000 people following her on IG right now, okay? So she's coming. You have a DJ. You got a food that's being catered, right? And so, yes, $75, family. So make sure that you're in the building. Get your tickets ASAP. And so what I'm going to do while Brother T is starting it off, I'm going to make sure that I drop the link to this event in the chat so you can get your tickets now. All right, and I will see you there. All right, Brother T, without further ado, can you please start it off, Brother T?
We're starting off on chapter 8. For those who have the book, that's page 181. The name of this chapter is The Most Unprecedented Robbery. As I was going through this first page, I summed it up as the end of slavery made their pockets empty, family life shaky, and made them question their faith. That was the first couple points that were made on the first page. And let me start off with the last part of the first paragraph. It was speaking of Eva Jones, okay? Miss Eva Jones, she believed that a life without slaves would be a life robbed of every blessing of her and her similarly situated people living in the South. I want to read that part again.
Please, Brother T.
Miss Eva Jones on June 13th, 1865. Let's look at that year, okay? So Eva Jones was a slaveholder. She was a mistress. She believed that a life without slaves would be a life robbed of every blessing for her and similarly situated people living in the South. So slavery ends, all the blessings that come from slavery, all the wealth, all the prestige, all of the land, when it's over, she's the one that feels robbed. Okay. Then it goes on to the second paragraph. It talks about after the Civil War came a bloody close. In the late spring of 1865, Ella Gertrude Thomas reflected deeply upon how she would reckon with the economic impact of the conflict and its aftermath. Initially, she was optimistic. Now, Miss Thomas first thought that, hey, you know what? I'm looking at this slave ending as a blessing. It's a good thing because I got sick of dealing with all of the business of slavery. That was her first thought. She was trying to be optimistic. Now, we already knew what Miss Joan said. Miss Jones already knew she had the impact of slavery. She was feeling the economic impact immediately. But Miss Ella Gertrude Thomas reflected deeply upon, and she would reckon the economic impact of the conflict and its aftermath. Initially, she stated, let me see what she stated here. It says, but also she saw slavery as a burden, an encumbrance. She was glad to get rid herself of it. As to emancipation of the Negroes, while there, of course, a natural dislike to the loss of so much property in the inmost soul, I cannot regret it. I always felt that there was a great responsibility and in some degree, great relief to have this feeling removed. Now, that only lasted every bit of 4 weeks. It only took 4 weeks for her disposition to change. I guess she realized when the money stopped coming in and all the blessings, she started saying, hold up, forget this. I was optimistic at one point, but now I'm stressed, basically. So by June, she had come to hardly despise Yankees, Negroes, and everything connected with them. Over the next 4 months, the reality of Thomas' financial loss and its catalytic impact upon her way of life made her bitter. She took her resolve and it weakened her religious faith. So it is amazing that when I read this page, I had to make that point. The end of slavery made their pockets empty, their family life was shaky, and it made them question their faith. But it was amazing.
Come on,
in
brother
the
T.
midst of slavery, they gave religion to those enslaved and asked them to hold tight and understand why they was being enslaved. But as soon as the money dried up, they shaken. They lost their faith. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Hey, brother T, look, I'm laughing at the first white woman who said that this, she called, this a most unprecedented robbery, right? She felt robbed. Here it is. You rob people of their humanity.
That's right.
Let's start there. You robbed a group of people from their humanity, right?
Mhm.
Robbed them from their humanity, treated them less than, treated them worse than they treated animals. You treated animals better than they treated enslaved persons. So we were robbed of our humanity. First of all, we were robbed of our homeland, right? We were disconnected from our homeland. So we were robbed of that, robbed of our culture, robbed of our language, robbed of our mores and forays, right? Robbed of our family because we were disconnected from our family who remained on the continent. So we were robbed of a lot of things, right? And so then when we were emancipated, now you feel robbed. Woe is me, right? But you didn't consider that we were robbed. We were robbed of our labor, robbed of our children, robbed of so many things, brother T. But now she's crying, oh, I feel robbed. But what lady, when I was reading it, I said the audacity to even say that out your mouth that you feel robbed. Well, what about the enslaved persons? You robbed them of life itself, And so when I read that, I was like, the audacity. And then, like you said, brother T, then she brought in religion. She lost her faith. But like you said, you were feeding us the faith and telling us it's your, Just deal with it. You got to endure it. Just trust in God. This is just life. This is, but you wanted us to endure. But soon as something happened to you, you start questioning your faith. Does anybody want to respond to what they heard? Anybody want to jump in before we keep going?
Go ahead, Willie.
Something that I wanted to point out about the first paragraph specifically was the fact that they have the nerve to enslave these people for over 200 years, but then they can call them lazy and act like they haven't been working for over 200 years. And I also wanted to point out how dependent they are on how they utilize their slaves, because they were very, very worried about what was going to happen after the American Revolution because of the slaves, or Civil War, sorry. And I also want to just point out their entitlement, because they felt like it was a right for them to have these slaves when they're just people. They don't have a right over anything. So
Yes, beautiful, beautiful said, beautiful, wonderfully said, William. And you're right, they were entitled. Go ahead, Sister Marcia.
Okay, the only point I wanted to make in this was the religion aspect really jumped out at me, because I felt like, okay, so whether we believe in Christianity or not, let's just take the premise of what Christianity is supposed to mean. The fact that slavery really shook their faith clearly tells me I don't think that they really ever believed in their God or in their Bible or in their faith. And that honestly, if I broke it down, that the true religion here was white supremacy and their God was capitalism. And that was really the religion here. I don't really believe that any of them really believe in the God that they were trying to push off on another whole group of people. And so that I just wanted to share that, because I thought that honestly, for me, I think the takeaway for me is that the real religion here is white supremacy. Fire!
Oh my God. Woo! Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Someone said it's called caucasity. The caucasity of them. Thank you so much, Sister Juju. Yes, facts. All right, Brother T. So moving on to page 182. And so what I gathered from 182 is that these white women were upset. They were depressed because they invested everything they had into the institution of slavery. So you had this one particular woman. I think it's maybe the same woman. It may be Thomas. Let me go see. Thomas financial loss. Before the war, she and her husband, had owned 90 slaves collectively. And she stood to inherit many more from her father's estate. But with abolition, she predicted, so it is her, she predicted her family's estate, her family's state of affluence would devolve into one of comparative poverty. Here it is. I don't even got to read the whole thing. What I want to pull out from this paragraph is that she said, it went from, she said she calculated that she was reduced to utter beggary. It says for the $30,000, Brother T, in 1865, what was $30,000? Can we look that up? Her father gave her $30,000. It says for $30,000 her father had given her when she married was invested in Negroes alone. 30,000 is, I mean, in America we might say, oh, that's just a car. $30,000 could do something for you right now. Regardless, some people try to minimize it. Oh, that's just a car, Dr. Maya. They ain't really know you ain't rich. My uncle would call it enrich, right? You just enrich. But $30,000 in the 1800s, Brother T, and hold on to Ren, $30,000. What we looking at, Brother T?
$30,000 in 1865 is equivalent to purchasing power to about $555,000, 526 and 38 cents.
$500,000 her father gave her. So he was dealing with, and he made his money off of the institution of slavery. He got her started, gave her $30,000.
So just think about this, Dr. Mott, before you go on. Mm-hmm. Think about the last chapter. We mentioned that they got $12,000 if they sold the slaves for the amnesty. Remember, they was getting a check $12,000. So she had 90. So you're looking at something around $1 million in worth just coming from the labor. So this is just putting the numbers in today's term, because it was like, I think $9,000 was what we was talking about last week.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And so it was crazy. Oh, Taryn, go ahead before I continue. You wanted to say something, Taryn.
Oh no, I was just gonna say we found it too and stuff. So we found the sum. But you can go ahead and continue.
Okay. And so what I got from the next paragraph is that, there was laws that weakened the institution of slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation was kind of like the final blow. And then when they lost the Civil War, that was a blow, because these Southern white men and white women, so-called, they thought that they were going to win, Brother T. They really thought that they were going to win. And when they didn't, it was devastating to them. When Robert Lee surrendered, and who did he surrender to, Taryn? Do you know offhand? I forgot his name. Who was the general that Robert Lee surrendered to?
Ulysses S. Grant.
Ulysses S. Grant. So when he surrendered to Ulysses Grant, that was devastating for the South. And so it goes on to say how, many of the slave owning white women, when they got the news that, he surrendered, a lot of them were like, man, it's over. Like, that was the final blow. You get what I'm saying, to the institution of slavery. And it said that these women, a lot of them, many of them faced poverty and starvation. And so it says some women responded by denying the people they once owned their rights and liberty, and sought to coerce them to work as they had under slavery. Others adapted old management methods to accommodate new labor arrangements. So a lot of our ancestors didn't know they was free, because white folks wanted to continue utilizing their labor for free, right? I know why they call it free labor, but when I think about it, I say I hate that term, because labor is not really free, right? Like, it's, you're getting something, but I get why they use it, the free market, free labor, and all of that. So they went from utilizing enslaved labor, right, to free labor. They had to negotiate for the labor, and so so these white women were trickery, and not just white women, but white men too. And that hence Juneteenth, right? So people did not even know. So I know a lot of the young folks, not on this panel, but a lot of young people who don't understand history, they think, oh, why did it take 3 days for them to get the message? Or why didn't they know until a year or two later? No one had cell phones. Okay. No one had cell phones. No one had telephones where they could just call. Telephones weren't even common back then, right? The telephone, I got to go back and look when Bell and them invented the telephones, the public telephone system. That wasn't even, go ahead, Taryn.
Yeah, and I was also going to comment on the fact that slaves also couldn't read. So, like, when they would put out in the newspaper, oh, slaves are free, it's ended and stuff, there was no way for them to know, because most slaves could not read, and the slave masters were definitely not going to tell them.
Absolutely. So no one knew. So like you said, you couldn't call your loved ones. If you, like you said, if you can't read, you can't write. So you're not writing letters to your loved ones saying, hey, this is what I heard, or mailing or sending things. So things started spreading through, and that was a really good point. Things started spreading through word of mouth. And then you had some enslaved people that just overheard white folks talking, and said, oh, we free. So some white folks straight up told black folks, like, look, yes, you all are free. But then some of them, some black folks overheard it. And then white folks were they spent a lot of time trying to hide it, because they wanted to continue to utilize the labor. Did anybody want to jump in? All right. So at the top of page 183, the first two sentences, it says, amid the jubilant screams and quick-footed two steps of enslaved people who just learned they were free, slave-owning women wept. White women cried. They cried in their diary, right? They cried in their diary. Like I keep saying, those European people kept some really good records, diaries, letters. They wailed. When we were emancipated, they wept, they cried. So we out there, I like how they say the two steps. So I know my black folks. We was out there getting it. Everybody was happy, and the white woman was crying. And so you had some of the formerly enslaved people, years later, say that they witnessed, their mistresses or former mistresses crying. They were crying. And so they were saying they were happy. At the bottom of page, 83, one of our ancestors said, they were happy that they were no longer in her pocket. You get what I'm saying? And that's what they use to convey the threat of sale. So if the threat of sale was being in her pocket, so they were glad they were no longer in the mistress pocket. All right. So at the top of page 184, anybody want? I see the mic is unmuted. Go ahead, brother T.
Yeah, I was on page 183, which was when they was dancing inside the fields. They were happy to hear that they were free. I think, I don't know if it was this page. I may have forgotten. Someone remind me if I'm wrong. One person ran 7 miles just to say, "I'm free," and you can't do nothing to me anymore. Like, and she used that the reference you just mentioned, Dr. Ma'at. But the mistress was so mad, and in the second paragraph, that she says, "I hope y'all starve to death," just because they were celebrating. They wished harm to them. They wished death to them just because they were no longer able to benefit them. So when I read that, I was like, look at this. You've read in the first page that they were crying and boohooing, crying about their wealth. Then they wanted to wish death to the ancestors just because they had the ability to be free. So once again, that shows you the heart and the mindset of the Southern mistress. She wasn't what they claimed her to be through the suffrage unit. She wasn't what she claimed to be when they were fighting for certain rights and privileges to be like the white man. So just to make sure, maybe known, there wasn't a soft and fragile woman that they claimed to be in from the South. The Southern Belle, I think they called them.
Up here talking away. I said, not only, brother T, did they cry, not only, and I got you, Sabria, not only did they cry and wish death on our ancestors, they also wish they died. On page 184, these white women was like, I'd rather die. I said, damn, you rather die than the institution of slavery be ended. You rather die. I'd rather give up my life. And it says some of them did die. They were stressed out. Some of them women actually did croak, but they kept saying, I'd rather die, than sit here and witness, emancipation. So, Brian, go ahead. I see that you had your hand up.
I was just going to mention the same thing on 183, where she said that she mustered enough resolve to tell them that she hoped they starved to death. And I was like, wow, that's sad for them to actually wish death upon us, for them, since they got freed from being enslaved for so many years.
Crazy. Like you said, it's crazy. Taryn, did you want to jump in? I see your
finger.
They
were Christians.
Yeah.
Right, these were Christians.
And I think that another layer to this was that they realized that their businesses could not survive without these Black people for multiple reasons. Not only because Black people did all the work for them, but they knew that Abby wasn't buying Tiffany's branded jam because Tiffany made it so well. It's because the Black people made it so well. It wasn't their recipe. They don't know how to do any of this stuff, and it's not going to exist without them. And these Black people can go on and make their own businesses and do the same thing without hiring people and make probably even more money, and that would set them into poverty.
Oh, I had to drop a bomb for brother T. Had to drop a bomb for. And so, 100%, everything you all are saying, 100% on point. Some of these mistresses, I'm looking at the bottom of page 184, Grace Brown Elmore, she wanted, it says she really had the belief, right? She really believed that African Americans would disappear after slavery, right? So her and a lot of folks, I just want to read this. It says, Grace Brown Elmore, for example, vehemently opposed emancipation because she did not think that African Americans possess the intellectual and moral capacity to live on their own as free people. I said, damn, when I read that, I said, white folks are just as miseducated as we are. So what do you think we were doing prior to enslavement and colonization? Just swinging through the trees, that's what they really believed, though. They really believed that we were an uncivilized group of people, and that they honestly believed that. So she didn't think that we had the intellectual and moral capacity to live as free people. So that shows you the perception that they had about our African ancestors. So it says right here, she says this: for Elmore, African Americans were the most inferior of the human race, far beneath the Indian or Hindu. They were poor, uneducated, stupid, lazy. And as Taryn said it earlier, she said, we up here doing all this stuff for you, but you got the audacity. One of y'all said it. You got the audacity to say we're lazy, but we built what you have, right? We maintain you. We help to maintain you. So lazy, stupid, self-indulged. It says so deficit. It says that's not deficit. Oh my God, deficient. I'm sorry. So deficient, did she consider them that she prophesied that they would simply cease to exist once ties between master and slave were destroyed. They honestly thought. They thought they were our lifeline. Hell, we were your lifeline. They thought that they were our lifeline, though. So we sever ties, we ain't gonna make it. And you see, that was 1865. It's 2023. We're still here. Anybody want to take it from 185?
The point I want to make about that is I honestly feel like when I was reading that, I just refuse to believe that they're this ignorant and stupid. Like, there is no way that they have took their behinds all the way to a whole nother continent, stolen a people to keep from doing work, and then to call another people lazy. Like, they have to know that what they're saying is not true. So for me, I feel like it's a projection. They know that they would be poor once slavery ended. They knew that they were too uneducated to hold down some type of job. They haven't done work for over 200 years, so therefore they have no skills. They're the stupid and lazy people, and therefore they will cease to exist once Black people walk into their power and in their truth, and low key probably thought that we would do to them what they did to us. And so they probably were thinking, oh my gosh, how are we going to make it? We're going to cease to exist once this unfolds. And so that's just the thing that stood out to me, is like, there's no way that they're going to walk away from this thinking that we're really lazy.
And that's why they don't have any culture. You can't cultivate anything if you have everybody doing everything for you.
Say that again, Taryn. That was a really good point that you made.
Oh, I said that's why they don't have any culture. If you're having everybody do everything for you, you can't learn any new tools or items or any culture or traditions for you to do. So, like, that's part of the reason white people tend to adapt other cultures, because they didn't have time to cultivate one of their own.
Ooh, hold on, God, dropping the eye. It's just, I might as well keep this. This fire! This panel is dropping it tonight. That's why you want to borrow and steal everybody else's culture, because you never took time to create your own. You just relied on everybody else. So page 85, Dr. Jones says other women felt entitled. Look at this. The white women, they felt entitled to formerly enslaved people's unpaid labor and questioned the authority of the federal government to rob them of it. So they like, hold it, but they do. That's how white folks are. They do. They question authority in a heartbeat. They feel entitled. And so you could kind of see that the same white person in 1865 is the same white person you see in 2023. I know that Black folks, we want to think that people are different, and and you all get on me. That is not everybody. It's not. What I'll say is this: we are our ancestors, and they are their ancestors. And I'll leave it like that. So we go on to say, it says, using the same logic, white women sought out ways to control the bodies and the labor of the people they owned once. It says, even after the federal government declared it illegal to do so. One way former slave-owning women held on to the labor, hold on to the former slaves, was to keep them uninformed about the free status. We touched on that already. But I do think this paragraph, Brother T, at the bottom is important, right? The last couple of sentences that talks about, the Civil War. And it says, at the war's height, 1 million Union soldiers occupied and fought in the South. By 1865, a little over 200,000 remained, and 36% of them were African American. So that, when people always say, we gave you, he emancipated y'all, they gave you. No, we fought for it. We fought for it. They said by the end, 36% of the makeup of the civil soldiers were Black men. So they didn't give us anything. We fought for it. So, so it says there, it says together the wartime absence of Union forces and their post-war withdrawal from significant portions of the South, it made it possible for slave-owning women to hold legally free Africans in captivity. And so once the Union soldiers started getting pulled out from the South, it was kind of like, black people were no longer protected again. We had no protection. And that's when violence started happening. So it says right here, violence by whites against blacks also intensified as Union troops evacuated the region. The federal government sought to address these kinds of issues when Congress passed an act that created the Freedmen's Bureau. Jesus Christ. Family, we're not going to describe the whole Freedmen's Bureau. Brother T and I think that we did a great job, describing the Freedmen's Bureau, discussing the Freedmen's Bureau when we discuss these two books. Family, make sure that you go back. Everybody should have, if you want to understand the condition of black folks, and I'm talking about post-slavery, right? I mean, we could talk about slavery and then post-slavery. You really want to get an understanding, read this book, The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap by Barry Darren. Also read this book, The Color of Law by Rothstein. Okay. Brother T told me about these books some years ago. He told me about these books some years ago, and I finally read them with him and discussed them with him. So it's crazy how I came full circle. But in those books, they talk about the Freedmen's Bureau, and it was a disaster. And I'm not going to say, Brother T, they didn't do some good. I'm not going to say that they didn't do some good. But it was a disaster, especially when we start talking about the Freedmen's Bank. That it was horrible. Black people lost, I think, Brother T, in the book, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, I think we lost at least $1 million, $2 million of our own money. You get what I'm saying? And so it was a disaster. But in this book, it says at the top of page 186, the Freedmen's Bureau, however, was designed to be a temporary entity, and it was unfunded and grossly understaffed. So they had a lot of issues going on. Brother T, did you want to chime in?
I'm sorry, Dr. Mike, did you the Freedmen's Bank, correct? You said we lost 2 million, correct?
Was it 2 million? I'm not sure.
It was an average, it would have been 55 million. If you look at
you saying if it was 2 million, then you're saying it will be 55
yes.
million. Woo!
Right.
I want to say it was 2 million.
And it's still trying to find receipts so people can be paid, ancestors can be paid. So it was one of the things that it was a savings bank, like a big piggy bank, and the government had no form or no way of protecting it. The ancestors who put their hard-earned money that they saved from doing the labor that they once was not getting paid for at all. So it's another way that we were not being protected, not just physically, also monetarily. We could not even contribute to the new economic powers that were creating during the time.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely, Brother T. Like you said, it was just a big piggy bank. And then it wasn't even managed by us. They was managed all by white men. You get what I'm saying? And then I think they just started mismanaging the money, and and then it was just gone. It was just gone. And so the Freedmen's Bureau. So we talked about that on 186. Anybody have anything else they wanted to touch on 186 before we move to 187? All right, the top of page 187, I have in the margins. I wrote in the margin that the black family couldn't catch a break, right? So at the top of page 187, it says unfavorable circumstances. White women negotiated directly with freed parents when they sought to retain their children in their labor for a while longer. Free parents persistently and vehemently fought to reconstitute their families in the post-war period. It says, but they struggled financially. It says few had the means to care for them, right? Care for themselves, and even fewer could care for their children as well. In light of these circumstances, some free mothers and fathers entrusted their children to their former mistresses in hopes that they would receive proper care. So post-slavery, I know we were happy to be emancipated, but we didn't have anything. It wasn't like we were emancipated and there was this system that was set up for us to kind of become a part of. where we could, we had the skills. I'm not going to say that our ancestors didn't have the skills, but it wasn't like there was a ready-made system that was set up, for us, right? Like, and so we left those plantations with nothing. We Our whole lives were on the plantation. Those homes that we lived in, if that's what you want to call them. I went down and saw them down in Charleston, South Carolina. They was living in barns, shacks, and all kinds of stuff. Little small cabin, one-room cabins. So little shacks. And so they left with nothing. And so you already know that they must have been desperate. Anytime you give your slave master, your former enslaved master, your children, because they couldn't provide for them. A lot of our ancestors, and no one wants to talk about this. Shout out to Brother Omawale Africa. He talked about this a lot. He said, do y'all know how many of our ancestors died from starvation post-emancipation? A lot of our ancestors starved. They were homeless. It wasn't like, yeah, we danced and we were happy. But, what are we going to do? Where are we going to live? How are we going to feed ourselves? How are we going to clothe ourselves? How are we going to feed and clothe our children? A lot of our ancestors starved, but no one talks about that. Shout out to Baba Amin. Baba Amin always talks about how that was another great migration that we don't talk about. Typically, we talk about this great migration that took place between 1915 and 1970, where our ancestors were leaving out the South and they were going north. They were going, northeast. They were going into the Midwest. They were going to the West, right? And we talk about those great migrations, right? And they say that it was two of them that took place. But what about the great migration that took place after emancipation, where people left the plantation and was traveling all over the place to reunite with their loved ones? That's another migration that we don't talk about in history books. Brother T, did anyone want to jump in?
And keep on, Dr. Marcus. That the next couple of pages still talks about keeping freedom a secret from enslaved ancestors.
Okay. So the bottom, so they left it. They felt like they were entitled. You go to page 188. It says, after the war, many Southern states created such laws to contend in part with the large number of allegedly orphan-free children. So they tried to say that these children were orphans. And I love Dr. Jones Rogers for saying this. She said, what often remained unsaid and unrecognized was that many of these children were not orphans at all, but had been separated from their parents through their owners' estate divisions, interstate relocations, and sales. So you running around the state saying these were orphans. No, you selling people's parents. You're selling people's parents off. So it wasn't that these children were orphans. You, and I'm talking about, when I say you, I'm talking about slave owning people, white men and white women. They were selling the parents. They broke up the family. And so shout out to Minister Farrakhan. He said it. He said slavery broke up the black family. People got mad when he said that, but it was true. Slavery did break up the black family. All right. And so it says right here, parents tirelessly searched for their children and attempted to reconstruct their families years after the war. So you go on to talk about that. Then she talks about an apprenticeship. So now they wanted to make black folks an apprentice, because remember, they're trying to devise ways to keep on making their money. That's why I titled this discussion, When It All Comes Crashing Down. They're trying to scramble right now to continue to make ends meet, to continue to utilize or control the body and the labors of our African ancestors. So anyway, it said an apprenticeship was probably, they're talking about somebody Annie Huff's owner also had in mind when she returned from her trip in Macomb and called all the children together to tell them that even though they were free, they would have to remain with her until they were 21. So it goes on to talk about how many of the South's apprenticeship laws established periods of indenture that lasted throughout the child's adolescence. So they're grabbing the children. They said, we're just going to make you an apprentice, right? So you 7, 8, you don't know what the hell going on. We're going to make you an apprentice. And, we're going to utilize your labor, and then we're going to free you when you're 21, right? They called that an apprenticeship. All right. And they had these apprenticeship laws. All right. But really, they called this, they really called this the involuntary enslavement of free children. That what was happening. They tried to call it fancy names, and white folks do that today. It sounds good. Oh, it's an apprenticeship. But what it really was enslaving. They were enslaving free children. That's what it really was. And then, Brother T, when I got to page 189, I said, Baltimore, why do we always make the books? We make all the books. We made it in the color of law. They mention us in the color of money, and now we're mentioning they were her property. So it goes on to talk about how it says a Southern Unionist, Thomas B. Davis, wrote to the judge of Baltimore Criminal Court to report a woman who he believed was perpetrating gross violations of the apprenticeship law. It says the woman whom Davis referred to as Yawu or Yule, it says not only forced free women off her land, she also refused to give them their children. So you talking about breaking up the family. This is what was going on, family. All right. It says children's kin were equally unwavering, though, however, in their efforts to reclaim them. So we never stopped fighting for our families. We always fought to keep our families together. So it says many free parents appealed to the Freedmen's Bureau for help when their attempt to take possession of their children failed, but others chose to take matters into their own hand and steal their children away. So some of our ancestors was like, forget it. I'm not going through the Freedmen's Bureau. I'm just going to go back to the plantation and steal my children. All right. And so, Brother T, that brings me to 190. You want to take it from here, or one of you all want to take it from here? Marcia? Mm-hmm.
I had a point that I wanted to make back on page 188 before we moved on. Here, I think it was just interesting that one, it made me remember why Black people really need to not put their faith and their hope or expectations into the federal government. I mean, the Freedmen's Bureau was created essentially to help Black people post-Reconstruction, but they aided in white women stealing these children.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know that before this. And I was sitting here like, you are upholding the separation of parent and child post the Civil War, and your job was to be on Black people's side to make sure essentially the money and the children and families got back together. So I was completely disappointed in hearing that. I don't know why I'm disappointed, but again, this is why we do not need to, as Black people, put our faith and hope in the federal government to ever aid in Black liberation or Black help or anything like that. And the second point was going back to children being separated from their families and the apprenticeship laws, which I'd never heard of. It reminded me again of the Trump administration when children were getting separated at the border. It really put me back there because I remembered how much of a big deal that was and how much people got into their feelings about it. And you know, that constant reaffirming, oh, this is not who we are. And I'm like, since when? This is exactly who America is. We've been separating kids since Black folks got here. And there was nothing, there was no outcry about the Black children and how this PTSD, since this right here has plagued Black people and us and our, you know, like I said, PTSD coming from here. Like, do you know the trauma that you have to go through when you're separated from something you've created? When your creation is separated from you, and that continues to plague within your family. So how our parents are over us, and it never makes sense why they're so, you know, almost clingy in a sense. I think that's a passed down DNA trauma. We always think our kids are going to be taken, and there's no like reason why we should think that. But yeah, if my daughter goes outside, my son goes outside, I'm like hawking, like making sure that they're fine. And I think that it's part of that goes all the way back to this, where we were never reunited. And I just think that that's just worth mentioning.
No, absolutely, that was worth mentioning. Oh my goodness, 100%. You know, like a trauma response. You know that was passed. That's now like embedded in our DNA, and I mean, and that could be a possibility. I mean, you know, people used to say when we used to say when our African centered scholars used to say trauma is passed down from generation. People laughed at our African centered scholars. Then white folks come up with the term epigenetics and how trauma can affect your DNA. Now everybody's saying, oh, it was true. Like, but Black folks been saying that for years. That trauma is passed down through our DNA. But thank you so much, Sister Marcia Pender, for making that statement. So now on 190 at the bottom, I see Joan Turner censure. She says argues that white Southern women harbored fears about the social disorder that they believe newly freed people would bring about, and that this and their long-standing dislike of the isolation of plantation encouraged them to move away from the countryside. Some white women stayed, however, and adapted to the new order of the southern farms and plantations. Reconstructing the South called for the implementation of the free labor system, and white women joined other former slave owners and planters who made contracts with the former slaves and agreed to compensate them for their labor. So now we're talking about contracting, right? But they did more than that. And see, make sure, family, that you tune in. Make sure you get this book. This is our next book, Slavery by Another Name. All right, because they did. You had contracts, you had sharecropping, you had convict leasing, right? You had all kinds of stuff that was going on to continue exploiting the labor of African people. Taryn?
Yeah, so in reading this reminded me of an experience I had when I went out to New Orleans for the Whitley, or is it Whitney? The Whitney plantation. And we read about there, like some of the enslaved people post-slavery, how they were roped back into staying enslaved. They would take loans from the slave masters, which would entrap them, and this continued for generations up into the 1960s.
Mm, mm. Terrible. And Sister Marcia, can you tell me? I want to mark that down. I want to put an asterisk next to it. When you said that the Freedmen's Bureau would side with the white women when they wanted to get custody of the children, could you let me know? Because it says Freedmen Bureau agents. Yep, it says
Yeah,
courts.
right
Oh,
there.
it's right here, right here. Yeah, you're right. Page 188. I see it. The agents, the courts often granted the mistresses. Yep, let me highlight that. That was an important point that you made. The mistress request. This is important. That is important. All right, but no, great point. You said up until the 1960s turn.
Yeah, to clarify what she was saying, there was a country store that the Whitney plantation had on the plantation. So post-slavery, the formerly enslaved people could buy things because the Whitney plantation was very isolated, and that was intentional. But they had to go to that store in order to buy things. But things were they let them put it on tab, if that makes sense.
No, that makes
Now,
sense.
how they could never pay off their debt. And so they were literally able to enslave people well into the 1960s. It was so shocking to hear when we were there, and they told us that the last person who was enslaved on this plantation didn't get their freedom and pay off their debt fully until 1960.
Wow, Sabrina. Wow. Did you all take pictures? Please tell me you took pictures.
Oh, of course, yes. I can send them
Oh,
to you in the messenger.
yes. That's hot. That's hot. Sabrina, I see your hand up.
I wanted to add on to what they were saying because how they were in debt, they were also forced to basically be enslaved and worked for the people until they paid off their debt, and they were just stuck until they got rid of it, which
Mm.
I thought was interesting when I first actually ended up falling into a rabbit hole of this information
Mm.
because I kept reading and I was like, wow, they really just ended up with a crap ton of debt and they couldn't pay it off. And when they did pay it off, it took forever for them to do so.
Let me ask you a question. Sabrina, oh,
Continued.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut your wisdom. Sabrina, I gotta ask you a question. Were you
Yes.
the sister who said that you didn't, when we first talked about slavery, and you said not slavery, history, and you said you didn't believe that history was important? Was it you? Everybody
Yeah.
said yeah. Yeah, you said you really didn't understand like the purpose of like studying it. You didn't really think it was important. Now, what you just articulated, did you hear what you just said? They made sure they kept them in debt, and they were trying to pay off their debt, and they couldn't pay off their debt. This is what you just said. They couldn't pay off their debt, and and when they tried to, it was too. Does that sound? Can you connect that to anything that we experience today? Can you
Yeah.
experience? You can't.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, think about, a lot of us are in debt right now. The institution. So so I'm just trying to connect the past to what we experience today. So we say, oh, history not important. What they did back then is still what they're doing now. So you may not look at it as that, Sobriety. This is not me pounding on you. I just want you to make some connections. What they did back then, and you just articulated very eloquently, but I want you to connect that to I want you to connect the past in the present, right? And understand that what they did back then, they're doing it now. You hear people in credit card debt, school loan debt, mortgage debt, rent. I mean, it's the same game. You're just not on a plantation, but you're not on a plantation because it's a different system right now. That was an agricultural, system, right? And then you had the industrial revolution. Now we're in the technological revolution. So it's just that, so our jobs have changed, right? And how we fit into it. But the I want to say the premise, that's the first word that's coming to my mind. It remains the same, right? The base, the foundation, what's going on, it still remains, it's constant. What they're doing is a constant, and that is keeping us indebted. And so I just want to kind of point out to you how what you just articulated back then is still happening now, just to prove to you there's a connection to the past, that the past and the present are both connected. Sister Marcia, go ahead. You have the floor.
Oh no, I was just going to agree with you. I think sometimes with children, and I think this is why I choose to make sure my kids are a part of discussions of what my finances are. I don't shield them from what our bills are.
Absolutely.
I let them know when we ain't got something. I let them know what my debt looks like, just because, a lot of children, their parents don't, especially Black families. We don't let them know what our money situation is because we don't want them in our business. But it's important for them to know your business so that way they know how to manage their money, and to be able to connect the past issues with now, because a lot of kids will be like, I don't have no debt, or I don't know what kind of debt my parents are in, so they may not can connect it. But I do get your point. It's important for her to understand that, just like the targeting us intentionally to make us get in debt because they know that it'll be a long time for us to pay it off and they can't leave until they do, is the same target like payday loans right now. And student loan debt is crazy ridiculous right now, and not being able to pay it off kind of enslaves you to settling and not being able to have financial freedom. Which, can you imagine a free Black person that's also financially free?
On
Game killer. Vicente, go ahead.
Something I also wanted to mention was how the USA didn't care about what I wrote down was the USA didn't really care about freeing slaves. They more so cared about, I guess, moving them back to Africa. Otherwise, they would have tried reuniting the slaves with their families. They would have tried giving them some sort of way to make it around in the country that they were in at the time. And this also kind of leads to today, to whereas Black people still haven't been paid their reparations for things that happened during slavery and stuff.
That's a fact. That's an absolute fact. So moving on, page 195. I mean, this is just going into, again, how white women, they felt entitled, to our labor. They felt entitled to our bodies, and how they modified their pre-war strategies, right, to accommodate, it says, the constraints which abolition imposed upon their ability to command enslaved people's labor. Okay. And it talked about how, that they started, entering into contracts with our African ancestors, but how their ability to negotiate those contracts came from when they had to do it, when we wanted to hire ourselves out, and we would negotiate with slave owning women and non-slave owning women, right? And we negotiated. So they already had that experience. They already had that expertise. So it was easy to kind of translate that to now having to formulate a contract in this new free labor market. So she talked about that. And then she gives some examples, how there was one particular, it says Miss Sally Rhett. It says the woman who owned Greenville is an example. She told her, her slaves that, go ahead and, finish this crop that you all were planting, and I'll give you 1/3 of whatever was harvested, right? And so then you had another situation where it says, Insight might give their former slaves money and property. So you have Frances Van Zant gave her former slave Amy Van, I guess, Zant or Moore, 2 acres. Wow, 2 acres of land when she freed her. It says the woman who owned Mrs. Charles I'm sorry, guys, is that Douthif mother? It says not only gave her land when slavery ended, but she built her former slave a home. All right. And so, wow. I mean, so some of them did do things like that. So it says Grace Brown Elmore made that the Negro as a hireling will never answer. So then you had some women who felt like as a hireling, so they would perform better as enslaved people, right, than they would as what she called a hireling. And so then they started comparing, you know, what we were doing with like indentured servants from Ireland. And they saw that we were better, I guess you would say, hirees than indentured servants in Ireland. All right. The top of page 199. 193. I said 199. 193. Okay, sorry, bottom of 192. I want to point this out. It says former slave owning women use coercive labor contracts in order to recreate the conditions that had characterized slavery. So under these new contracts, it was like worse than slavery. It was slavery or either worse than slavery. So some of these women, they wouldn't feed and clothe the people. And it said this one particular woman, I'm looking for her name. Okay, Mary S. Blake. Her name was Mary S. Blake. And it says that, she wouldn't feed and clothe the formerly enslaved people. And it says she would have given them less than they would have received as slaves. And this came out of the mouth of a guy named Colonel Thompson, who assessed, her contracts. All right. And so then it says other female employers contracted with free people to cultivate and harvest the crops in their lands, and then force their employees off their property without any pay after they completed the work. So they was running game on our ancestors. Go in and cultivate this crop. I'll give you a cut. And then when they got what they wanted, they forced them off the property. So you had different things going on like that. It says the free people who worked for the former slave owning women, they did not willingly accept the labor contracts their employers sought to impose. They appealed to the Freedmen's Bureau agents and lodged their complaints against their employers in the Freedmen's Court. All right, so it was different things going on. You had some, according to the court records, some of our ancestors complained because they said they were given no clothing, for 3 years. Some of our ancestors said there was no compensation other than their board and clothing. Okay, and so people were denied, wages, food, clothing. And it says employers also made threats of violence. And these two led free people who worked for them to file complaints. I want to read this and I'll pass the mic. It says in a post-war climate, characterized by white Southerners, unchecked violence against the murder of free people, it took enormous courage for these formerly enslaved men and women to take such legal action. So it was courageous, Brother T, for them to even go to the Freedmen's Court and, and hold these formerly slave owning people accountable for what they were doing in these labor contracts. Does anyone want to get in?
We have in page 194, and we realize on the bottom of the chapter, we don't work that hard no more. It's basically what they was staying in. They thought that we can work with these negotiations. We had this new thing after slavery. If we hire you, we expect you to work the same way you worked prior. But they was up for a rude awakening. So we go to the bottom of page 194, and it says that even for a woman who do not live extravagantly at this pre-war time, the loss of their economic investment in slaves posed significant financial problems and difficulties. Then it goes to the last paragraph. As many of these women face poverty and destitution for the first time, they try to recreate their past lives with the labor of newly freed people. These women assume that freed people would serve them in the same way that they had before the war. But freed people frequently disappointed them. One former slave came to Beaufort because she thought some of her niggers might come to wait on her. But her mother's former slaves had different plans. They ain't doing it no more. So it says, although they refused to work for her, they offered her food, money, and clothes. In the end, her circumstances compelled her to earn a living with her own hands and to become a dressmaker for the Negroes. Isn't it turn? That's a turn of the tide, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes life became so difficult for former slave owning women that they were reduced to beggary among the people they had once owned.
Mm.
Two young women visited their father's former slaves, pleading their poverty and begging for help. These free people gave them gifts or potatoes,
Wow.
plates and spoons, and money. One enslaved woman even took the shoes from her own feet and gave them to her former mistress. The tables have officially turned. Former slave owners found themselves at the mercy of those who they once owned. So we go to this whole chapter, and now we realize that the people who practice the real Christian beliefs and the mercy was the ones who were enslaved. So we go all the way back to 182. They talked about when things were taken away from them and they couldn't do the same things. They lost their faith. But those who gained their freedom, who realized that someone was in need, they practiced certain principles that they learned across the way. So it just show you that the humility that our ancestors had, to still see people in need. Not saying that there wasn't some who didn't feel this way. I'm just saying that they've said, you know what, I'm gonna help you anyway. I'm not gonna be like you. You said this earlier in the chapters, Dr. Ma'at, maybe a former a page chapter we hit. I don't want to harbor the hate in my heart because I don't want to become them.
Mm, I
And
don't.
that's the thing that's what was showed here on page 195.
Fire! 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 Fire!
Golly, brother T. Like you just said, the real Christians. You start seeing the real Christians, and that was our ancestors. And brother T, I'm reading this. I'm like, Dad, gone. Look at our ancestors. Despite all that was done, despite all that was done, they looked out for him. Here goes some shoes. Here goes some spoons. Here you go. Here you go. And our ancestors had mercy. They were merciful. They were merciful. But look at Desaline. Do you remember in I-80 when they
Mm-hmm.
lost? Desaline told them, "All right, I'm gonna let y'all go. Just go back. Tell your people, not to come back. Just to leave us alone." And you know what? I don't even want to call them devils. You know what they did, man? They got to the shore at the Desaline. Said, "Well, go ahead, man. He could have killed them. Let's be clear. He
Mm-hmm.
could have killed them, but he was merciful." And he said, just go back and tell your people, tell your European powers, tell them to leave us be. Tell them to leave us be. That's all. And when they left, remember they got on shore, Sister Marcia, and what did they do? Turn the cannons and started firing the cannons on I-80. At the Desaline was merciful. He could have just killed all of them, but he didn't. They surrendered. He said, okay. He let them go. And look what happened. Look how they repaid that. You get what I'm saying? But our ancestors had mercy. Our ancestors had mercy on them. And so, Brother T, thank you so much for highlighting that.
It was a point that Sister Juju wanted us to read the definition of magnanimous. It says that it's a generous or forgiving, especially toward a rival or less powerful person. So that was a word that was used in this chapter.
Oh, yeah,
Thanks,
that's
Sister Juju.
yeah, thank you, Sister Juju. Yeah, that's one of my words right there. Magnanimous. I always tell my mother and them I'm not like where they are. I'm not there yet, Brother T. Um, I just say I'm just not there yet. But I'm maybe I'll get there one day. All right, but I'm just not there. But they definitely were magnanimous, and I do applaud people who are. I think I am in some ways, but I'm just not there. I don't think, Brother T, if they would have knocked at my door, that I would have said, "Here's some grits and potatoes." My mother probably would have. My cousin Shawnee, who's probably watching, she would have. But my aunts and some of my cousins, we would have slammed the door in their face. Okay.
Put a
That's
one in the chat, guys. Put a one in the chat if you would have gave some socks, shoes, or potatoes This is one. I just want to take a little survey before the stream is over.
Yeah. Would you have given your former slave masters, your former captives? Would you have given? I like that. You said a one or a two or one. If what, brother T, is that a yes?
Put one in the chat. Somebody put a three. Put a one in the chat if you would have gave a potato. You'd have been
And a two.
monogamous.
And a two. Why people doing thumbs down? They put zero. Gabby did a zero. Juju put a three. Tiffany did thumbs down. Why Juju did a four? People said hell no. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Look, Black Shade said, I mean, you could have had my raggedy funky shoes, my raggedy funky old shoes. Here you go. My people, Baba Gregory put a zero in the chat. They said they ain't giving you nothing. I couldn't do it. But I read that part, Brother T. I said, golly, but like you said, that's that Christian upbringing, is that Christian upbringing. And I can't, that's just me. So anyway, it goes on to talk about a German seamstress, and we almost finished, family. A German seamstress had brought, an enslaved girl for, $1,200 in gold. And it said that the purchasing power was approximately $36,500 today. And what it goes on to say, I feel like I'm missing something, Brother T. It was 1,200 she paid for Jane, and it would have been a purchase power of 36,000. It says at the end of the spectrum, Irene Smith, who pleaded with the secretary. So everybody is, stating their grievances. Irene, she pleaded with the Secretary of Treasury to protect her property during the war. She saw her personal estate worth $678,000 in 1860. Reduced to $70,000 a decade later. So they were filling out all these applications, family. All of these applications. Okay, and goodness gracious, it says another woman. It says Jesse Irene, blah blah blah, a blow which she never could recover. It says they described their losses in their application for presidential pardon and amnesty. Now, at the bottom of page 195, before we move on, I do want to highlight how Dr. Rogers said that, when historians write about white Southern women's experiences during the Civil War, they tend to foreground their human loss. Oh, I lost my daddy. I lost my brother. I lost my husband. But they never, ever talk about the economic losses that these women, suffered. And she said, well, certainly, of course, they grieved, these men who went off the war, right? It says they went out then. It says they suffered from the loss of the slaves their husband and male kin owned. It says, but the applications of former slave owning women, and we're talking about the applications for presidential pardon and amnesty. It says, but the applications of former slave owning women for pardon and amnesty make it clear that losing the enslaved people they owned in their own right was no small part of the trauma brought by the war, And so at the top of page 96, it talks about how on May the 29th, 1865, President Andrew Johnson issued the first of three proclamations that granted former Confederates amnesty and pardon if they swore oaths of allegiance to the United States. Okay. And they were laughing about this. This was a joke. This was a joke, the white folks. I pledge my allegiance to the United States. Here goes your property back, right? They gave their property back. By the way, I do want people to understand that when these people joined back with the Union, they gave these people reparations. They gave these people their land back, right? I know at the top of page 196, they mentioned 40 acres and stuff like that. But Brother T, when we read, I think it was The Color of Law, and that whole 40 acres and a mule. And for years, I've been watching Spike Lee movies since I was a kid. And I'm like, yeah, they owe us 40 acres and a mule. We were supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. And we're thinking we were supposed to get it for free. And come to find out, they wanted us to pay $1.25 per acre, fresh out of slavery. So they weren't really giving you 40 acres and a mule. They offered you, right, to pay for these acres, $1.25. Okay. That stuff, so sometimes it pays to really research, because Black folks, we say some things, Brother T, and we keep repeating it over and over and over again. Then it becomes a truth in the Black community.
Don't put it in a meme.
Then don't put it in a meme. And then Black folks, they were mad at me when I last week on IG. I don't know if you saw it when I said Black people don't have a buying power of $1.2 trillion. They said, Doc, we don't have it. You just heard people talk about it over and over and over again and then figured that it was true.
It goes up $1 every week.
He said it goes he said it goes up $1 every week, brother T. Don't it? Don't it? At first it was 1.2, that is 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we traced the origin of the lie, I mean the origin of the myth, it went back to a black boule who was just trying to get white advertisement dollars. I'm sorry, advertisement dollars from white people. That's all he was. Robert Johnson, owner of Jet, Ebony, and BET. He sold black folks out, and it was a lie. Back then, he said it was billions. He said black people was spending billions of dollars in 1954. In the height of Jim Crow, black people were spending 1954, brother T. We were spending billions of dollars, right? In the height of Jim Crow, and we were locked out of the housing market, confined to ghettos, and we were spending billions of dollars in 1954. Okay, so anyway, they get pardoned. They had to swear. Swear. Their allegiance to United States. They call it an oath of loyalty. So they had to do that, and it said the federal government concluded that this simple oath was not enough for individuals who engaged in certain kinds of rebellion against the Union, or for individuals who own property valued at $20,000 or more. Okay, those people had to apply directly to the president for amnesty and pardon, and he would determine whether they could reclaim their property. Lastly, it says by 1867, Andrew Johnson had granted special pardon to more than 13,000 men and women who empathized with or aided the rebellion. White men constituted the overwhelming majority of the petitioners. More than 400 married, single, or widowed women or were among them. And then she offers up reason why it may have been 400. Brother T, did someone want to take us home? We almost home. Did someone want to take us home? Everybody like, no.
Okay, so we hitting down to the last page. You want to hit 199, Dr.
Yeah,
Mott?
we all 197. We almost there. We at 197.
Okay. 197. Okay, let me go
You
ahead.
want me to finish that up, or
Go ahead, yeah, because I got some underline. Go ahead.
okay? Oh, go no. If you got something underlined, go ahead.
Oh no, it's basically what you were going to say next about the petition is not being obligated to describe their feelings about the war, enumerate to their financial loss, emancipation brought about, but many former slave owning women chose to touch on such matters, though some quarterly accepted the abolish of slavery as a fixed fact. The petition often focused upon the enslaved people they had owned in their own right. The day that Andrew Johnson issued the proclamation, Carrie Lomax, you heard that name before, Carrie Lomax submitted her application for special pardon and amnesty. She wrote that the largest portion of her estate consisted of slaves, now free, and where it had been practicable that former slaves were employed by petition, freemen under the regulations of the Freedmen Bureau in Montgomery, Alabama. Elisa Gray wrote that the equally devastating losses, in addition to their loss of property destroyed by the Army of the United States. I just wanted to put that point because they would find reasons to kind of add a little bit more oomph to their petition to get the amnesty. So they would blame the soldiers for coming to ravish, or they lost it because of something. They had to show some, like you said earlier, Dr. Mott, they had to show that it was something of it was devastating that made them lose their slaves so they can get this money from the government. And that goes all the way until we start talking about the pardons and stuff too on page 198 and also 199.
Yeah, they were talking. Yeah, brother. I just want to add, these women were trying to get back their livestock. They were trying to get reparations, so their money, their livestock. They were trying to get back land that was confiscated. So they were trying to get back everything, but of course, enslaved people. But just trying to get like property back. So go ahead, brother T. Take us home. 198.
So we go down to the last chapter because they continue to talk about the Freedmen Bureau and Emancipation Act on page 198, and what we basically stated on 197. So I'm gonna go down to close to the last paragraph. It starts off probate court. The probate court of Moringa County, Alabama, where marriage took place. Furthermore, because Alabama law also secured her property to her separate use, Her slave stocks and lands had been doubly secured. She applied to Johnson for amnesty and pardon so that she could access her livestock and lands. Once she reclaimed her property, she could take care of her family as she'd done before the war. So Mary L. Carter also appealed to President Johnson for a pardon because her husband, Jesse Carter, had little property, and the property and estate owned by her was the sole source of income for the support and maintenance of her family. I wanted to read that part because I want to stress when white women wanted more rights and laws in this country, they wanted to make sure this never ever happened again. They said they wanted to make sure that they have rights to their children. They want to make sure they get money if the husband run off again. I want to make sure we have what you call it alimony, and I want to make sure I have the right from my property. I want full profit. So they made sure they didn't care about nothing else. Now they got whiteness that made them, right here and right the right thing in America, but they wanted to make sure they had full ownership of everything. So everything that was mentioned in these chapters from 1 to 8, they've been fighting to make sure they are going to be 100% owners of whatever property that they come in with. So that's why I wanted to read that part. You want to add on to that?
No. That's perfect. And I
Um,
just, yeah, I'm with you. Like everything you said was 100%. But keep going, brother T. Brother T.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Oh, you got a question.
my point's on 199. So if you have something that you want to add on, you can finish it, and then I'll go ahead. Or you
Go ahead, brother
done.
T.
Oh,
make your
he's
point.
good.
Yeah, make your point at 189, and I'll continue.
So my point on 199, it reads about the white slave owners. It says, rather, they continued using their personal estates to help provide for their families. They, but they and not their husbands were the hardest hit economically by abolition. About abolition. Okay, cool. Abolition. And the point I wanted to make with that was just, I think that sentence really sums up the whole book of that they were her property. White women took the biggest hit for slavery, and I think that was an important part to make. And I think my biggest takeaway from this was that white folks, or as Dr. Mayat likes to say, the so-called white folks, are very presumptuous people, meaning that they failed to realize what's actually going on. The white women were the ones who suffered the most from slavery. White men could still work and could still go to work and retain money, but white women could not. That's why they started protesting to get higher raises. Like, white women need more money because their main source of income had disappeared.
Mm.
I only have a final point to make when everybody's kind of made their point about this particular chapter. So I'll just make like a summation of what I think about the book. Only after everybody's made the points that they want to make about this chapter, I'll do that.
So you summed it up pretty well, because that's what I wanted to do, to talk about the last part. And it says the former slave owning women thus enabled to restore their lives, some semblance to familiar with their land estates back in their hands. Those women began to build their lives anew. So that was the end game. You know what I'm saying? The queen on their board wind up helping to win. They wanted to gain their wealth, and they found ways to do so. So remember, they had no say in the beginning in marriage and in the beginning of this book. And as we go to the last chapter, they found a way to regain their property. And then now, as we learn in later years from this point, from 1865 and beyond, how they became full owners in the rights and privileges of white supremacy here in America.
Hold on, I gotta drop a bomb for that. That was, oh my gosh, brother T. All right, family. So look, we just read the last chapter of They Were Her Property. All right, white women white women as what? What does it say? As slave owners in the American South family. Make sure that if you have the book, I mean, if you don't have the book, go get the book. And if if you need to go listen to the discussions, because I feel like we thoroughly discussed these chapters. So even if you don't have the book and you're not interested in reading it, you can go back and just listen to the chapter discussions and you'll learn something. Family, make sure you grab this book right here, Slavery by Another Name, The Re-Enslavement of Black Americans from Civil War to World War II. So we're talking about from 1861, Civil War, right? Or maybe post Civil War, 1865, right? All the way through World War II. We're looking at Brother T, the 1940s by that point. So that's what we're looking at. That's why it was crazy when you told me black folks spending billions of dollars in 1954. How, Sway? If we were still dealing with Jim Crow. And so, anyway, family, we will be picking up on the first Sunday of June. Brother T and the panel, everybody needs a break. Okay. I know I definitely need a break. We all need a break. All right. And so, hold on, Sister Marcia. We all need a break, family. And so, make sure that you grab this book. We are going to start discussing, and I think it's not even hold on, it's part one. I like to read the introduction. So we're going to read the introduction the first Sunday of June. We will be reading the introduction the first Sunday of June. Family, if you can get this book from a Black-owned bookstore, try to get it from a Black-owned bookstore first. All right. You got Everyone's Place. You got Black and Nobel in Philly. It's a lot of positive vibes in Virginia. A lot of our Black bookstores, they're closing in the Black community. A lot of Black bookstores are closing and they need your support. I know it's convenient to go to Amazon because you order it and then tomorrow somebody's doing this right on your doorstep. Okay. And so I get it. It's convenient, but we got to support our Black-owned bookstores. So try to get it from Black-owned bookstores first. And if you don't live near one, you can call Everyone's Place. You can call one. A lot of our Black bookstores ship around the world. Okay. So try to get some first. Sister Marcia, I saw you ready to say something.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of sum up for me, like what this book has kind of meant, what I've learned, like what I think the point is of this book. And it was in the final paragraph of the epilogue. And it said, former slave owning women's deeper and more complex investments in slavery helped explain why, in the years following the Civil War, they helped construct the South system of racial segregation, a system premised, as was slavery, upon white supremacy and Black oppression. Understanding the direct economic investments white women made in slavery and their stake in its perpetuation, and recognizing the ways they benefited from whiteness helps us understand why they and many of their female descendants elected to uphold a white supremacist order after slavery ended. If we acknowledge that white women stood personally and directly benefit from the commodification and enslavement of African Americans, we can better understand their participation in post-war white supremacist movements and atrocities such as lynching, as well as their membership in organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, and also remembering that they also constructed those white supremacist monuments around the country. Southern white women's roles in upholding and sustaining slavery form part of the much larger history of white supremacy and oppression, and through it all, they were not passive bystanders. They were co-conspirators and the prophets of the religion of white supremacy.
That was powerful. Brother T, that was powerful. That was powerful. That was powerful. I want to talk to the youth. Does the youth have any closing words regarding this book? Does the youth have any closing words regarding this book?
I was just gonna say, I think this is a book that at least most majority of Black people should read because it really speaks a lot about slavery and about white women's role in the situation and how like some of this can be translated to today's world where maybe some white women in the system could try and take advantage of Black people the way they did in this book.
Wonderful. Taryn?
I think that this book is important to read for many reasons. It's important for white people to read so that they understand their role in this. It's important for Black people to read so that they can stop enabling the behavior. It's important for people who are activists to understand that the importance of why Black Lives Matter in that movement, because we are still going through slavery just in different forms, and understanding how the manipulation works and the gaslighting and just the tomfoolery of the stuff that we have to go through on a daily basis. And knowing the calculatedness of their people is very, very important for them to understand.
Absolutely. 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 Brother William, Sister Sabraya.
I just wanted to say that I do agree with the other chief saying that the book is really important for like black people, both black people and white people to read, because it teaches you that white women aren't as uh, submissive as most people think. It breaks that stereotype to show that people that they aren't like really good, I guess, because it shows that they weren't the only ones not they it shows that they weren't not participating in activities of slavery.
Absolutely. William, close us out. Not well, you and Tia close us out.
I find this to be very important for Black men in general, just because it really shows how white women are trying to manipulate people, because they can easily manipulate Black men to make them look like a bad person and then get them in a lot of trouble, if not death. So I think it's very important for Black men and some white men to know what their role is in that.
Wonderful. Brother T, you have any closing thoughts, closing words?
This book was an eye opener. I thank the panel for the explanations, the great detail. I mean, this is awesome. Sister Juju put inside the comments below. This is the continue that goes on today. If anyone knows about the statues that's all around the cities that we go to of all the Confederates, think about what's in our schools. And thank goodness for people like Dr. Ma'at and this great panel, homeschooling, taking the time out to educate your youth. Because in the libraries in every city, you have the support and the inspiration of the Daughters of the Confederacy.
Absolutely.
They're the ones who put that information inside the libraries. There's no information that's beneficial to our kids in those libraries. So, Sister Juju, thanks for putting that in the chat, because we need to understand exactly how the Daughters of the Confederacy continued this white supremacy dogma.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And shout out to Sister Donette Mitchell. She said, I already purchased the next book from a black owned bookstore. So family, I saw High Casino. You came in here. You said, when do we go? What's the next book? It's Slavery by Another Name. Okay. We will be discussing it the first Sunday of June. We just want to take a break, man, for the rest of May. All right. Because it takes a lot of time, man, to come out, to be dedicated every Sunday, read the chapters, come online, talk about it for 2 hours. That takes, dedication, and it also takes energy. And then you're away from your family. I want to go, Brother T, and watch a documentary. They got a Zora Neale Hurston documentary on Prime. I want to sit there and watch it. But when I get over here at almost 9 o'clock, I'm tired. And then on the TV is watching me. Now I know Taryn and William and Sabraya and Jacente, they probably, golly, she sleep by 9 o'clock. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I used to hang, till 2, 3 in the morning. But man, I'm in the bed now at 8:30. I used to hate it when my mother said, get in the bed. It's 8 o'clock, 8:30, get in the bed. Now I voluntarily get in the bed at 8:30, Brother T. I take naps during the day. I used to get mad. I used to get mad when they say it's time to take a nap. It's time to take a nap. I say, God, leave them adults get on my nerves. I don't want to take a nap in the middle of the day. Now I rush home to try to take a nap in the middle of the day. So anyway, family, we do need some time off. And so you won't be seeing us on Sundays, but I may be live, on some Sundays, because I may miss you all and want to tune in and just get online and talk to you. But the Read Book Club is officially over for the rest of May, and we will see you the beginning of June. Family, make sure that you're in the building, family, for the Mother's Day event. All right, with Sister Marcia, Sister Marcia Pender, Sister Marjorie Nicole. Make sure that you're in the building, man. This Sunday, we're going to have a ball. Okay, we're going to be out there DJ and all kinds of stuff. I dropped the link in the chat. I dropped the link in the chat. Make sure you get your tickets ASAP. All right. Make sure you get your tickets ASAP and come on out to enjoy a great brunch where we be celebrating motherhood and most importantly, celebrating all of the mothers who have transitioned and honoring them and breaking bread together. So make sure that you're in the building, family. All right. We're signing off. Have a black-tastic week. Peace and black power. Uhuru, Sasa, Abibi Fahodie. Peace and